All right, so it is 1:02. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to our roundtable talk on the value of supply chain and the sustainability journey. I'm Dana Senek-Puckett. I'm a graduate of the University of Washington Supply Chain Transportation Logistics program and the moderator for this talk. I currently work at Philips as a senior procurement engineer in oral healthcare, located in Seattle, Washington. And so this webinar is a part of the Masters of Supply Chain Transportation Logistics series on hot topics. We're discussing current issues affecting supply chain, logistics, and transportation. So please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. This topic is important to me because I recognize that supply chain, logistics, transportation professionals have a unique and an impactful position in the sustainability journey for any company. We engage with design and engineering for the selection and sourcing of materials. We maintain supplier relationships and hold them accountable. We plan and schedule materials, selecting transportation methods. Operations participates in facility energy consumption, scrap, recycling. But all together with leadership, we have the ability to steer the supply chain in a more sustainable, circular, and ultimately a better direction. So let's take a moment and introduce the panel of very engaged people here. Why don't we start with you, Thomas, and tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks, Dana. My name is Thomas or Tom Maxner. I am a research assistant and PhD student in the Urban Freight Lab, which is housed in the Supply Chain Transportation Logistics Center. And to date, all of my research has really been focused on decarbonization of specifically last mile deliveries. And I'm actually at a conference here in Long Beach, and I'm looking at the Port of Long Beach, and almost all of our conversations in the conference have been revolving around sustainability.
Thank you. And Tammy, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Richardson. I am a senior director at Microsoft. I think you probably can see the title there. I'm a supply chain professional. I'm in our Microsoft retail area of the business, Microsoft stores. And I'm on the board of UW's Supply Chain Transportation Logistics. So very excited to be here, many years of experience. And so I'm hoping to shed some light and get learnings as well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Stephen, we'll just go around.
Sure. I'm Stephen Roberts. I'm the Assistant Director of Mail Operations here for the University of Washington. We're in charge of delivering mail and lots of logistics and distribution between this campus, Tacoma, Bothell, all the medical centers, UW-MC, UW Northwest, UW Montlake, and everything in between.
Perfect. And Douglas.
Hi, I'm Doug Stevens, and I lead and manage the bicycle delivery program for mailing services here at the UW.
Thank you. And Charlie.
Hey, folks. So I partner closely with Tammy. I'm also at the Microsoft side. I head up our sustainability program management office for the Windows and Devices business group of Microsoft. So I kind of take a bird's eye view as to how our software and our hardware all comes together. And then Tammy makes it real in our supply chain to actually get the reductions we need to hit. So we partner very closely and are very excited for the conversation.
Perfect. So thank you all very much for introducing yourself. I think we can kind of start with, what is your organization doing to raise the bar in sustainability operations? So, from a Philips perspective, we really use the Paris Agreement and the UN 17 Principles of Sustainability as kind of our guiding light. We're really focused on health and well-being for all, circular economy and climate action as our main targets. And we are measuring our success in reporting out to ESG for environmental, social, and governance through our annual reports. So we're holding ourselves accountable from a leadership standpoint, but the actual execution throughout the facility and through the different operations teams looks different. So we're always talking about how can we level up our organization and, work harder to improve, either refurbishment kind of programs or eliminate waste in packaging. We're always troubleshooting new opportunities for a more sustainable supply chain. I think everybody can kind of talk about what their organization is doing. Charlie, do you want to talk about Microsoft a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So at a high level, Microsoft has set some pretty audacious commitments for sustainability, which we're very excited about. As a company, we've really talked about environmental sustainability as being centered around 4 main pillars. One of them is to become carbon negative by 2030, which means to actually pull more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere than we as an organization emit into it. One of them is to be water positive by 2030, which is actually to replenish more potable water than we use in our operations. A third is to become zero waste by 2030, which is a composite of a bunch of different things that depending on the focus area. But ideally, all the products and all the operations that we have, we want to make sure that there's no waste coming out of them. Things like repairability, recyclability fit neatly into that for our products. And then finally, the fourth category is that we want to protect the environment, protect the ecosystems more broadly by providing and building a planetary computer, which not only will help us be land positive by 2025, protect more land than we use, but also for NGOs and other organizations to take advantage of our software to support the ecosystems that they're trying to protect.
Very nice, thank you. And then Stephen, you want to talk about the efforts from University of Washington and kind of what you're working on?
Sure. Our overall campus is working to become carbon neutral, I believe in around 2030 as well. For us, we wanted to get ahead of that. So that's why we're moving away from gas powered anything and have moved in the direction of what we have now, a fleet of e-bikes, electric assisted bicycles with giant cargo boxes that fan out, deliver mail, pick up mail and distribution packages. And then centralized service where vendors come here, drop off things, and then it's distributed to our campus and all the other 2 satellite campuses. For us, it's just important to be ahead of the wave that we know is coming. So instead of having folks let us know what they'd like us to do, we figure we can get ahead of it with best practices now and be an industry leader to show people exactly how it's done and, to get ahead of the curve. Just makes sense to do it now on our own and help everybody else design an actual good logistics program that is workable.
Yeah, very nice. And Thomas, how is the Urban Freight Lab kind of helping out with some of these goals?
So the Urban Freight Lab is a little unique in the academic setting where we have 16 partner organizations or members that are companies. And I think all 16 of these companies, if they're not entirely focused on reducing emissions in the last mile sphere, they definitely have sustainability goals. And personally, my research has been focused on kind of one aspect, which is carbon dioxide emissions. And our most recent project related to the challenges to reducing emissions in this space. And the idea there is to really educate a broad audience. Much of what our research focuses on are practical solutions. And we want to kind of enable companies that maybe haven't set those sustainability targets yet to really understand what challenges are ahead of them in order to face them better when they do arrive at that decision point.
Yeah, perfect. So I think that actually might lead us into how we measure sustainability and what does that mean from a numbers standpoint. Do you want to maybe say how you measure sustainability for these companies?
I think it's different. Many of the companies, at least the large carriers, so like UPS is a member, Pepsi, they have what are known as science-based targets. So they're very concerned about calculating accurately what the emissions from each of their own vehicles are, and they're also very interested in when they work with contractors, making sure those contractors also have the capacity and the understanding of how to measure their own vehicles' emissions, so they can provide both an accurate representation of what is being produced now, and set realistic goals for when those vehicles are replaced by electric vehicles, for instance.
Very nice, thank you. Charlie, how about Microsoft? How are you guys measuring sustainability?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is something that Tammy and I have actually talked about a lot, because there's the very numbers heavy, metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. And then there's the reality of like, what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? How many trees is that? I'm putting a link in the chat. There's a fun calculator that you can use to make it real. But I think high level, Dana, if we think about our external reporting today, we report in terms of, we have 14 million metric tons of carbon dioxide that Microsoft is accountable for. That's equal to 3 million cars, gas-powered cars driving for a full year, as an example. So we think about kind of that aggregate corporate reporting. We have our science-based target. We're even going beyond that with our carbon negative commitment. But then we also complement that external reporting with more granularized data that fits underneath it. One example of this is something called life cycle assessment, which is to take a product and do a unit of one measure of every single component that goes into that device, all the way back to the mines that they get the raw materials from. So the laptop that I'm on right now, as an example, is around 120, 150 kilograms of carbon for its entire lifetime, making it, moving it, using it, recycling it at end of life. And then we even go into Tammy's world one level deeper, where we can say, actually, we know that the emissions factors that go into the logistics of our operations, as an example. So we can use that telemetry, that real-time data, to even get a real-time understanding of how our emissions are occurring at any given moment. So it's a mix of kind of the big corporate all up view that we do once a year. It's the product specific life cycle assessment that we use in our product development. And then there's that actual logistics telemetry that lets us know for sure, like, hey, should we put this on a plane? Should we put this on a boat? Should we put this on an electric vehicle?
Yeah, and thank you very much for that. And Stephen, how about you guys? What does measuring sustainability look like?
Well, for us, it's important for us to measure metrics of what it is that we're doing. If we're eliminating trucks, we want to show how much CO2 that each truck has now been removed, from the atmosphere. Also, gas reduction savings for our fleet, and cost savings overall. Like a new truck costs $125,000. The fact that we didn't buy 3 is a significant savings. So it's important to have that data to be able to show the powers that be. There's other departments on campus that would benefit by mirroring what we're doing. And I think over time, they'll get that data and it will help others to make that decision as well.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. So I guess that can also lead us into what are the impacts of sustainability on the bottom line? And I think, Tammy, do you have some thoughts on that?
I do, and thanks Charlie too, because he and I have discussions on. I'm like, Charlie, what does this mean to me? Tell me, I can, after so many uses, I can create a star, name a star after me or something. I need something more tangible, water bottles that I've saved, etc. What I say is we're still figuring it out. I think that's the bottom line. It's almost like it depends, right? Sometimes you have questions like, that depends. I think we're still figuring how to operationalize and how to actualize our ideal. We know we need to save our Earth. It's in trouble, right? Global warming, and some of the contributions of that is from the Industrial Revolution. We're now in this technology AI kind of state, and we're now able, as Charlie said, the PCs that we're creating to try to measure this in some fashion. But there's not necessarily a standard way. We have the governmental terms of that. And we do know, again, that the policies are then interpreted by each organization, et cetera, and it may come out looking differently, right? So I think the other thing that I would say that is very qualitative at this particular point, if you get beyond the CO2 for each truck, and we do that, right? For the transportation, we try to shorten the length of the distance that the trucks are having to deliver our products, and you measure the gap between that long distance and that shorter distance. The other thing we're looking at is solar panels. Some of these physical things that you can really touch, the packaging material, can we use less? Can we not throw batteries in the landfills? So these are some of the, I guess, the tangible things that you can actually touch and measure. But I think, again, the bottom line too is that we're educating our workforce and the community on what this truly means. So all of us are on this journey. We're starting to see a lot of companies staff their ESG, right? Their ESG roles and getting chiefs of ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And within each one of those little pillars, there are certain things that we do know and don't know about. But here are some of, like, for example, the intangible things that when you talk about like social, this is the race and equity. This is all part of sustainability. Like, well, how does that fit? You know, so people are having to step back and really do some critical thinking on how we measure to the bottom line. And it's almost like goodwill, you know, on a balance sheet. How do you measure goodwill? It's taking a while to figure that out. And still, that's kind of subjective, how you measure goodwill. And I see the sustainability as doing that. The last element I would say is to the bottom line. Younger people are buying from companies who attempt. If you're not even attempting to do this, they have options and they're making it known with the money they spend. And they're not afraid to spend a little bit more for those who have made a sustainable effort in their products and services. And I'm thankful for that. That's forcing a lot more of us. And then the pandemic has caused us to deliberately, crisis brings about creativity as well. I think it was almost a global experiment. You will figure this out, right? The earth got a chance to rest. Oh, and we can do this without the way we currently do it. So yeah. I think some of that, we take it to the bottom line, but we don't know how to quite measure it yet.
And just a very quick on top of what Tammy said, a good example is, you know, it's generally less carbon to put something on a boat. But to put something on a boat, you probably need to hold more inventory. So you're balancing the embodied carbon of all the products you have to make with the ability to optimize your mode of transport. And that's just one of a million of these really interesting trade-offs that are incredibly complex, but very exciting problems to tackle, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think another kind of good question to ask is what does good look like? So when you say goodwill, and we have this, you know, these concerns about greenwashing, you know, this is a big term about, you know, how we're putting out statements that may or may not actually be affecting things, you know, or advertisements. I think that the Clorox green cleaning solution is always one that kind of comes up as an example. But, you know, so what does good look like for your company to not be presenting yourselves as green for the sake of it, but really actually executing it? Mm-hmm. Stephen, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yes, we've actually saved tons of money. I just am surprised, you know, how much money we've saved. Each one of our mail trucks costs us $16,000 a year just to put fuel in it. And our e-bikes, a brand new e-bike fully outfitted, looks like this. It's all fancy. That costs $10,000 with that giant box on it. Yeah, workers getting exercise, and the tangible difference between that and a $125,000 vehicle is huge. You know, it requires less maintenance. We don't get a huge fuel bill. There's been, obviously, everybody knows about budget cuts and reductions in costs. We've been, you know, we're not immune to that here at the University of Washington. So we've been able to absorb those budget cuts with bad economy and things like that through being sustainable with, you know, with e-bikes and other measures we've taken to reduce waste. It's been a huge benefit to us.
From a commercial company standpoint, one of the things we do is we ask, right? So, you know, we put across the concepts that we're thinking about and what we're thinking about doing for a product, and we put it in front of a commercial group of consumers, and we ask them, you know, how do you think this stacks up? These are the things that we've calculated in terms of carbon savings, or, you know, what does this look like to you? And they'll call out, well, it's still plastic. Right? Sure. You know, and can you do better? And they're always pushing for more, but still allowing, you know, that understanding as to, is this better than what we were doing before? And, you know, can we continue on that level to improve? So yeah, we ask.
Yeah, you know, I do want to acknowledge, Joe, that that is the beginning of your journey. Again, I
Yeah.
mentioned that the attempt to even start is
Yeah.
winning, right? Because before we would look at these things as cost savings, right? Six Sigma, lean manufacturing. You just went so far to the left or right on your thinking because you're trying to save costs and take that to the bottom line. So even if you just start at the beginning of your journey, it's usually saying, well, what are we currently doing that can be considered sustainable? Like, give me example of the water industry, water bottles. Who ever thought we'd be paying for water? You know, but we do, almost $2 a bottle. They took away a lot of the hard plastic, made it softer. By the way, that's lots of money saved. If you're in, I've been in manufacturing, lots of money saved to have that flexible water bottle, right? And to take away the packaging. And so now the structure engineers, the structure of that pallet is made up of the actual water bottles. So there, it's not mutually exclusive to say, I want to save money at the same time, I want to be sustainable. What it does take is you got to get out of this automatic mode of this is how we've done it and automate so many things and the way we do our processes and streamline to say, to step back and say, you know what, actually we could do two things at one time. But in most cases, your first step is actually start reclassifying the work that you're doing if it fits the criteria. That will be one of the first steps any company can do to start their sustainability journey. But I think there's the other one where, and a lot of the hard work comes is actually looking at vertical integration, you know, and you're going to have to partner with people. There is no way that you're going to get to these zero carbons that we're talking about doing it alone. Just no way. And so I do want to recognize that costs as well as sustainability can go together.
And that's the perfect world, right? Is like when the business incentives align with the sustainability incentives. And there's so many good examples of that. But Dana, to your point, we have to make sure we're good stewards of the message so that we don't say that something that we're always have been doing, it's like, oh, we're sustainable now because we're doing this thing that we've been doing for 10 years. Right. We do have to earn the trust of our customers over time. There's a reason we have 2030 targets at Microsoft and not 2022 targets, right? This is a journey to get to this net zero reality. We're going to make progress along the way. I have my ocean plastic mouse, which is made of 20% ocean plastic, because if you made it with 100% today with how we engineer, it would fall apart. Right? So we have 8 years of R&D, of innovation, of investment that let us get on that journey and earn the trust of our customers so that they can understand and be on that journey with us. I think anyone who says we're sustainable today is probably being disingenuous because it is a journey. It is not a point in time.
Yeah, and at Philips, we are always leveling up our goal because, you know, we start with trying to improve the lives of 2 billion people by 2025, and now it's improving the lives of 3 billion people by 2030, and also enabling 300 million people better access to, you know, so we're trying to count, you know, people for improving lives, for better access to low-cost healthcare, for we are measuring our net operational footprint. So our net operational carbon footprint in 2020 was at 0%. So we do 90% operational waste recycled. So, you know, the activities that the business is doing in order to be sustainable, a lot of it is not necessarily stuff that we're talking about either. You know, it's just the activities that we're doing in order to be better stewards of our planet. Yeah. I do see that we have some questions in the chat. So one of the questions is, do your organizations have a willingness to pay a price premium, 10 or 20%, for implementing a sustainable practice or product? And how are you balancing CO2 reductions versus increased cost to do so? I don't know, Doug, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, when we were researching electric assist bicycles, we were definitely willing to pay premium for equipment that would test, you know, to be able to stand up to the rigors of daily package delivery on the university, at the university. We're doing delivery for all of Central Campus and the University District out in Sandpoint. And as we are started out as mailing services, of course, but as things have changed, we are delivering a lot of packages. So we really needed a bike that could carry that weight. And I forget what the second half of the question was.
Oh, how are balancing CO2 reductions versus increased costs? How are you balancing that?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really had too many increased costs because the bikes have really cut down on our CO2.
So your balance is perfect.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's been very successful.
That being said, though, we're still not satisfied. We have
Okay.
goals. There's like more vehicles we want to eliminate. So it's like Charlie said, it's a long journey. We're in it for the long ride.
Very good. Any other thoughts that anybody else would like to share on that?
I can contribute to that. So for our challenges research, we interviewed, I think 15 different companies. And I would say a good 2/3 of those companies are certainly willing to pay an upfront cost in order to reduce emissions quickly. I think the struggle that they face is when we're talking about electric vehicles, for instance, replacing Amazon delivery vans, for instance. It takes a really long time to test those vehicles to ensure that they can deliver the same number of packages with the same range. And so they will be willing to pay more for the vehicle, but they still want to be able to provide the same customer service to their at-home delivery customers. And that's a really important aspect. And at least in the last mile space, a lot of the technology is new to these businesses, and it's sort of in its infancy. And unfortunately, that means there's kind of a long time scale where all the technology needs to be tested by these companies before it's really implemented at scale.
I think that's a really good point, because one of the things we run into is sometimes either the technology doesn't exist. You know, you have a wild idea and you want to do this great thing, but who's going to support you for that? Where is it being made? And that's a really difficult question. But even the availability of things like electric vehicles is very challenging in today's market.
I'll also just add, in the delivery, the last mile delivery space, there are many owner operators, so single 2, 3, 4 truck operators that really can't afford to be spending 20-30% more on their vehicles. And when you're talking about electric trucks, it's usually 2 to 3 times the cost that they would typically pay for a diesel truck. And so I do think there's room and certainly a need for government intervention, whether that's by subsidies and that could be subsidizing the research to get the vehicles to market quicker and reduce the price that way.
Yeah.
There's also, just quickly on that, there's also the other side, which is that several governments around the world are discussing carbon taxes. So right now, carbon emissions are an externality that is not accounted for most companies. So Microsoft, for example, actually brought that externality in. We have a carbon tax we charge ourselves. So, you know, if Tammy and I do a bad job, it's actually going to be a bigger, you know, charge to our P&L at the end of the year. So, you know, that could be a future thing that then kind of takes those hidden costs of your kind of gas vehicles and then makes them more apparent. The trick is, how do we do it in a way that doesn't completely put everyone underwater, especially, Thomas, in your world where you've got a lot of individual owner operators that couldn't afford to have to pay 20% more for their truck. You know, it's a fine balance to figure out how to do.
The other thing too is there's lots of grants out there that people can apply for. Our fleet of hybrid electric trucks were paid for in part by the United States Department of Energy. And the students on campus actually funded the e-bike program that we have completely. And there's just a lot of money out there that we found that people can apply for. And surprisingly, the bucket is really deep with funds. A lot of folks just aren't applying for it. The U.S. Department of Energy was like, "Oh my gosh, you're our first applicant this year." So there's money out there. You just have to go to the Googler and look it up.
Or the Bing, you know, we have Microsoft on there. Watch those words. Bing it.
Another question from the audience from Jeff. What challenges do you face when attempting to align internal business goals with public-facing aspirational ESG goals? So that's a really good question. Anybody want to take it?
Wow. I think it's real.
Yeah.
I think it's real. our society, and I think globally, our society measures success by how the stock is doing. And that's usually monetary, with ROIs associated with, well, why do you want to do this work? Or what's the ROI associated with that? Or we have processes, models, and systems associated with this. What we talked earlier, this work is this journey is pretty new. It shouldn't be, but it is. And having systems and structures to support it and to quantify it. So it is a challenge. If you have a leader that's forward thinking, it's not as much a challenge, but it is. And then now that society is putting pressure on it, I mentioned the younger generation again, is putting pressure on these companies to you will sell us better products or we won't buy from you. There is a forcing mechanism that says, whoa, wait a minute, we have to, some other company is going to beat us to this. So that pressure needs to stay there. The tension needs to stay there. That will cause companies that saying this is not monetarily right, versus a qualitative type of metric, quality of life metric that does not exist right now, by the way. So it is a challenge, and it's something that's not talked about too much right now. Again, the acronyms is ESG. We haven't figured ESG out completely. So it's a fair question, one that I don't think you have anyone that can completely answer, because it's real. It is real. It's a challenge. You have to have a passionate person that's going to shepherd this work, and it's going to take years to prove that it's worth it.
And you kind of come back to, the internal business goals, of course, through the ROI, but if the technology isn't available at scalability, and the cost is above that 20 to 30% tolerance, I mean, that's a very high tolerance for most businesses as well. It can be really difficult, and it's something that you have to continue to work on and chip away on to continue to refine that business case and find new partners to kind of to build that platform.
Well, the alternative is the global warming catastrophes we are dealing with right now, right? So in some essence, if we do nothing, like, okay, we're going to keep getting what we got. Do we want this? That's also helping reality set in for folks. Oh, I am actually contributing to the problems. Before it's like hidden or something, right? I guess it took years for the ozone layer to start just, I quit. But it's like we're having real issues now that you can see, those who denied it's so evident every day in our lives now. We have to do something different.
Absolutely. Another question, how do you foresee navigating the desire for micro freight solutions that don't fit size-wise into a typical bike lane, path, or parking infrastructure, but also don't do well on standard roadways? This sounds like more of a question for our UW team. Stephen, do you have any thoughts on that?
What we've been doing is designing everything. Okay, so I'm the big boss here on campus when it comes to distribution. I did not design anything that's going on. The team members, these folks are experts. We have a fleet of bicycle riders that love what they do, and they've come up with brilliant programs, boxes that fit inside bicycle lanes so they can move stuff from trucks to bicycles. And they've been very, very successful at doing that. And they're just really innovative. They look at the problems that are out there and they manage to find solutions for it. They found vendors over in Europe that can generate and create boxes or bicycle frames that are industrial strength that will last us for years and years. And that's the direction that we've gone. Having small delivery mechanisms, has worked out great for us. We may not, so if we have a mail truck that holds, 1,200 packages, an e-bike might be able to hold a couple hundred with a trailer attached. But in this case, is it best to have that one truck go on campus and make one giant delivery, or does it make sense to have a couple of e-bikes zoom in and out during the day as packages come in? We found that it makes sense to have e-bikes zoom in and out. They can get in faster, get out faster. The University of Washington, as much as I love it, is not friendly to deliveries. Anybody that works on campus knows that. And the bicycles have been a brilliant answer to that. We don't need loading docks. We don't need anything. They just can zoom up to the front of a building and they're in and they're out. And so you can actually size things down to a level that makes environmental sense and business sense. It can be done. You just have to go out and look for solutions and talk to the experts in the industry that simply know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I missed anything, Doug?
Yeah, the way we're set up is each building has a mailroom or a reception, kind of similar to a carrier locker, so that when we make deliveries to the buildings, we're going to one location, and then the tenants will come and pick it up from there. So we're able to spend less dwell time, as you might say, at each building.
Yeah. And to be fair, it used to not be like that. We used to do what was called desktop delivery, where you would get the mail to your desk. And we eliminated that as part of a reduction in waste as well. It just didn't make any sense. People come and go from buildings all day long. They go out to have lunch, they arrive. So we just told people, when you come in the morning, go check your mailbox in the mailroom, and you'll have something there or you won't have something there. But either way, it's a good exercise. It's good exercise for all of us to walk a few floors away and get the mail. It just makes good business sense. And when you add in electric assisted bicycles, now we have employees that are pedaling around. And I have to say, they're the healthiest employees in our organization.
What percentage of UW mail delivery is by e-bike?
Doug?
It's about 3/4.
Wow.
So we're doing the entire campus, West Campus, the University District. And then with the hybrid electric trucks, they go to the libraries. And they also go to North Campus resident halls, and that is just due to volume. And then we also have an electric hybrid that does the health sciences and the UW medicine. And but we are looking to introduce bicycle delivery to especially over the med center or health sciences, where with either trailers or a larger trike to service those facilities.
I want to add to that because you know, I know that we're talking on college campus, and I hope more college campuses or closed environments can look at that as, you know, a model for them to do. But I want to add some of the things that are happening out in the industry, right? So one of them is drones, right? So we have people talking drones and these driverless vehicles, and they have safety issues, but we can have these electric full truckloads, as well as the some drones for the smaller cube. Well, one factor I also wanted to mention is the, you know, crisis often causes creativity, right? And then a lot of times that we stay North America or US centric with solving for some of these problems, but there are other countries who already solve for some of these problems. Have you ever seen like motorcycles in, say, in India, and they got they just have loads and loads of things that they figured out how to stack it and still ship to very rural and on roads that are not nicely paved that we're so used to here in America. And so oftentimes I just have to I want to remind the audience too that we have to take a step back and look at what other countries are already have solved for and are doing that we've not adopted here in, you know, one of the best countries in the world. But the other thing in the supply chain language that I wanted to speak is, you know, when we talk about cubing out versus weighing out. So when we're talking about full truckloads or less than truckloads, right, on these carbon emissions, these are some of the things that Charlie said get into the granular level. But we've been looking at how do you cube this? Why would you cube this thing? Why would you fill this truck out with fewer boxes versus weigh it out, like put his stuff as much as you can safely, you know, 45,000, you know, 53 footer, that type of thing, and not deadhead. That's the other thing that we're talking about. Like, oh, you know, if you're going to deliver to someplace, why aren't you bringing that same truck, not empty, bring it back full? So we want to reduce the number of deadheads, bobtailing that you see in the industry, right? And we already talked about freight versus ocean and rail. These are some of the other things that we're thinking about. And then the last thing I'll say is late stage differentiation, right? As much as you can. Toyota used to do a really good, the car industry do a really good. They put their suppliers right near them in the same vicinity. And at the last minute, you add on to some of these elements that the customer may want to personalize and customize versus shipping it 100 miles away and then getting started. So I wanted to add that to the conversation because anyway, just to expand it just a little bit. Thank you.
I like that you said that, Tammy, because during COVID, we've learned that people don't necessarily need that mail truck every single day. And we've had customers that say, hey, we'll come in the office, we're teleworking, we'll come in the office just on Thursdays. And
Yes.
So all their mail is waiting for them on Thursday. Instead of us driving there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we're able to eliminate that. So things have changed. And now with, well, COVID's not over, but with it being a little more under control and a certain percentage of folks back in the office, some people are still blacking that mail, not every day, but every other day, or, you know, during a certain cycle, because they're like, well, we're not getting anything that important that can't wait an extra day or two.
I love it.
And then, you know, in terms of the micro vehicles, or sorry, micro freight solutions, Tom, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think in general, your bike manufacturers, Coaster Cycle, Irby, do try to design their vehicles to fit within standard lane widths. Most bike lanes, if they're bi-directional, are somewhere between 6 and 8 feet. And almost all cargo bikes that are being used in the US will fit in those. I recognize that there's definitely special circumstances when you're adding a bike lane to an existing road that's not very wide. I think there's another opportunity here for companies and cities to actually collaborate. So one of the challenges that our cargo bike manufacturers have expressed is actually finding parking rather than finding a place to ride the bike. And New York City has an interesting, it was a pilot program, it's actually permanent now, where they provided bike corrals, took up a parking space and provided bike corrals for the cargo bikes to load and unload, rather than having to leave either the bike lane or the road surface, drive up onto a sidewalk, obstruct pedestrians just to access someone's apartment. So it's a matter of the companies talking to cities when they're installing a new bike lane, making sure that the specifications match existing technology. But it's also speaking to the cities to ensure that they really understand both the capabilities, but the needs of a cargo bike operator.
That's very good, thank you. So I mean, I guess on that note though, what other trends and technologies do you see that is improving sustainability across the supply chain? And I think, Tom, you had some thoughts on this one.
Yeah, certainly. Well, in the last mile space, electrification is a huge part of the conversation. So that's electrifying trucks, alternative fuels. If you think of beverage distribution, a Budweiser truck or even a Dasani water, I don't know, whatever comes to your mind. Battery electric is really not an option for those vehicles right now because liquids are extremely heavy. So they're looking at alternative fuels, but also changing the way loads are consolidated. And Tammy kind of spoke to this, whether you load a truck based on weight or volume. And they're looking at, some distributors are looking at picking up new products. So you can put soda bottles as well as bags of chips on the same truck and reach the same number of customers. Technology-wise, I think we've talked a lot about curb management. So that's kind of reducing demand, providing space for commercial vehicles to park so they're not blocking lanes. And that involves a lot of sensor technology and also app-based reservation systems. Cargo bikes, parcel lockers, those are all certainly on the table for these companies. I'll add to the chat the paper that we wrote. Don't interpret this as shameless self-promotion. There is a lot of good information, and this is based on interviews from companies. So this is what is actively being pursued today by our interviewees.
I have mixing centers too. I agree with everything you said, Tom. Mixing centers where companies are sending their products to like the center and customers can order a mix load. So you can have less trucks going out full load with the same thing at different points versus a few ones going out to what you really need. And then, like Walmart, and Walmart's offering services to other customers in that fashion, like they will become that type of center to other customers. So just kind of getting, crisis mode again. I think we're going to see some very creative things come out for us. We have to.
Yeah.
So if I can jump in, Tammy, you mentioned Walmart. I actually learned something today that they're paying customers to pick up their neighbors' packages rather than putting it on a delivery truck.
Yeah,
and that's an amazing idea.
It is creative.
Yeah, I remember along those lines. I forget the name of the startup I talked to probably 5 years ago. It was a startup. It was kind of like an Uber or a Lyft, but you can just say like, hey, I'm driving from here to Toledo. Anyone need anything delivered along the way. And yeah, people would just like, they get paid to go along their route, and then they deliver a couch or whatever to somebody who needed it in like Columbus or wherever it might have been. So there's a lot of really cool, interesting ideas like that to match that supply and that demand of space, basically. And then I think, Thomas, to your point on the alternative fuels, one thing that Microsoft is also investing a lot of money into through our Climate Innovation Fund, which is this like $1 billion massive fund that's been set up to try to invest in this stuff, is around the area of sustainable aviation fuel. So planes are also a pretty unique vehicle in the sense of it's really, really hard to make those electric because of just how much power they need to go into the sky. But there are different mechanisms we can use to swap out the existing fuel that's used for more kind of nature-based sustainable aviation fuel. So we're hoping that cost of that goes down over time by us investing in it, using it in trial, kind of trial corridors, so to speak. But like, that carbon tax I mentioned before, we jacked it up for business travel to $100 per metric ton, with the idea being that we take all the proceeds of the business travel that we do and then use that to start feeding into paying for sustainable aviation fuel to offset those flights that we have to take.
Wow.
So, and that's only going to grow over time, by the way. That fee is probably not done growing, which makes a serious consideration if we even travel for business anymore. But part of it is, we need some vehicle to get the funds to invest in these alternative fuels, unless we want to abandon air freight altogether, which I don't think any of us here are ever going to reasonably expect is a reality.
One quick question. I mean, we're kind of coming up on the end, so we'll see if we can fit another couple questions in. I think a good one is, who is driving the targets in the transformation? Is this coming from consumers, stakeholders, investors, government? Who's asking for this to get done?
Well, it's the planet, Dana, right?
But combination.
Yeah. Underneath that, it's such a good mix. I think Tammy has said it really well. I would say there's probably 4 or 5 different key stakeholders, and one of them is the employees themselves. I can speak, everything Tammy said is true. I joined Microsoft specifically because of Microsoft's sustainability commitments. So you can count me as at least one person who's made a career decision based on this. So you have the employee activism on one hand, you have the shareholder activism on the other hand. I think you've all probably seen BlackRock actually took over ExxonMobil's board and forced a climate resolution in their board, right? And like, this is happening all over the place. So you have that as well. Customers, as Tammy mentioned, are putting their money where their mouth is for more sustainable solutions. Certainly within our devices business, this is becoming a huge factor of competition. So if we aren't sustainable, people aren't going to buy our products. We've seen studies that show that purchase intent is like, sustainability is like one of the top 3 purchase intents for people who want to buy a new PC globally, which is wild. And then to everything Stephen said, there's also that financial opportunity in some cases where like, hey, being sustainable is more cost competitive, right? It can reduce your costs. So all these things together are then aligned with, I would say, the scientific basis for all of this, which is, what do we actually have to do to save the planet, right? We know we don't have a lot of time. We know we have to get net zero in basically the whole world by 2030. So it's a kind of a conglomerate of all these things in my perspective.
How about you, Tom? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think there's, I'll take 2 different perspectives. You have the company and then city involvement, because more and more cities are becoming involved in the last mile space. So I suppose I agree with Charlie. I'm not going to actually add any other any elements, stakeholders to his list. It's pretty comprehensive. On the city side, it really comes back to the same people that are customers. It's the constituents of elected officials, and oftentimes sustainability goals are set by the mayor's office or city councils. And that comes directly from the people who elected them to those offices. In an agency where people are, directors are appointed, but employees are not necessarily facing election or anything like that, it really comes from phone calls from constituents, from residents. And sustainability is becoming more and more prevalent. It's not just people calling about the pothole in their street. They are concerned about what the DOT is going to do about all this congestion. And that's a huge factor that makes cities decide to address that issue. And then the third are companies directly contacting a Department of Transportation or Sustainability because they want to pilot a certain technology. And cities are really eager to hear from companies and become a partner, but they don't necessarily have the resources to begin the conversation.
Thomas, how much does environmental justice play in here as well? Because certainly if you have a lot more gas vehicles on the road, that's a lot more kind of, smog for the city, which can be unhealthy for certain groups. Certainly like tree cover and things like that, lack of tree cover can create these urban like heat deserts and heat sinks, oftentimes, unfortunately, consolidated around, less affluent parts of cities. I'd have to imagine that for a city, that's probably part of just the health of the community, and the environmental justice is probably part of that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Any change that's happened, Port of Long Beach, Port of Los Angeles, Oakland, SeaTac, that is hugely driven by that environmental justice concern, and community organizations approaching government officials, port officials, everyone to make some changes. So yes, that's a huge element.
We had a quick question from Nathan. He asked if we can think of any incentives in place for companies to shift the shapes of their supply chain, such as changing production or distribution hub locations for the primary purpose of pursuing sustainability goals.
I can talk to that. I'm speaking a lot, but urban distribution centers is a strategy to reduce emissions. And a lot of companies and cities are thinking about that. If you move your distribution from outside the city, you have the ability to use other modes to deliver your goods. So it's smaller vehicles, it's electric assist bikes, rather than having to drive a diesel van 30 miles from outside the city to just start a route. But the challenge there is land in cities is so expensive right now. So it's hard to justify for companies when they're paying 12 times as much for that smaller plot of land.
Yeah, but I do also see, again, on a global basis, that you see the treaties, right, or the UN, et cetera, trying to address some of this, right? Some of the conventions that are happening. For example, coal use in China, right? We have lots of people that live in China, and America uses coal too. Not, they're trying to go to wind like Australia, et cetera. So we're seeing some of the global impact, and we call it the North versus the South, right? The global North versus the global South, who suffers tremendously from some of the industrialization that's happening. So I think that some of the companies have to address where they are and change some of the behaviors of how they're doing, how they're industrializing their countries, because it does have an upstream and downstream impact on other countries. So the treaties and that we're trying to sign, and the Kyoto agreements, all these things that's kind of been sitting there, and we need to dust them off, and sometimes where America has walked away from it and we're the biggest offender, we have to address that. And that's back into all this sustainability conversation that we're having, that we have to pressure our elected officials to come to the table and represent what we desire. And it's not just in America, but our impact to the rest of the world and vice versa. So I wanted to mention that as well. Sometimes it's staying in where you are and addressing the issue and changing the behavior, like our recycle. You don't have a choice in some cities. You have to recycle or you find. So policies that need to change in local communities in support of.
And one benefit of the way we measure carbon today also is, historically, you've only had to measure your own operations. So you could cheat by outsourcing all of your operations to somewhere else, somewhere dirtier, somewhere probably in the developing economy, developing world. With today's carbon accounting standards, that's all considered your scope 3, which is the biggest part of most companies' emissions. And Microsoft is no stranger here as well. We have to take responsibility for all the emissions related to creating, moving, and using our products. We cannot hide by hiring a company to make it for us. We cannot hide for hiring a company to ship it for us. So I think now that we're actually accounting in the right way, hopefully that helps to drive the conversation about how to reduce on that global level in a way that is genuine and aligned with the true incentives to reduce.
Yeah, very good. That was a great comment. We have 3 minutes left, And I was just curious if you guys have any like further comments to make about, well, sustainability. One thing we haven't really touched on, at least in terms of terminology, is circularity versus sustainability. And you know, so sustainability is a very large term, you know, and there's all these different elements within that. Do you want to speak to like circularity, Tammy, and maybe a little bit about what that is and how that plays?
Sure. Circularity. So we think of a circle. That's exactly what it is, right? But Charlie said, creating, moving, and using. If you're making something, and in our case, Microsoft, you're making a product from you take it from the environment. So from its original origin. So pretend we're digging some kind of metal out the ground, right? We want to do that in a sustainable way. We're fair with how we're treating the farmers or how we're treating wherever it's coming from. That ESG again, right? So if it's coming from a tree or the ground, we need to do it sustainably. And when we transform it and we make something into it, what is our carbon footprint? How much are we emitting to the air? Are we manufacturing it in a sustainable way? And then what's the output? So here I got this beautiful shiny box. Like, do we really need all that material? So you're starting to question, again, your footprint. We can throw away all of this useless stuff because it's like Christmas. We got all this wrapping, it's beautiful. And then we just throw it in the trash, right? Unless you have a little kid and they play with the box and not the item in it, but that's another subject. So you have the output of the product that you're making. And you have to, again, be very mindful of your carbon footprint, the packaging, the shipping, the storage, you know, of your, whatever it is, your thing, your widget. And then finally the usage, because somebody's buying that product, either a consumer, an end user, or a company. You know, you selling to another company. What are they doing with it? Are they recycling what they can? Are they repurposing it? So your waste becomes somebody else's input. And this is where it becomes circular, right? And then what impact is it having on the ecosystem, which is the global climate? So you have that whole circular thing you got to, you know, be cognizant of and be intentional about letting it sit in a landfill or letting it go up into the environment without, you know, some deliberate work. So that's the circular supply chain. And you may play in a certain part of it, but you're still responsible for how does it happen after it leaves your possession. And that's the new thing, because it's like, good luck. Here's all this box. Good luck. Or put it on pallet and, you know, whatever. Not
and I really view it as an extension of kind of the circle of life. The planet itself is renewable, right? And, you know, waste becomes benefit for the next, you know, trees take the waste and, you know, from the atmosphere and make oxygen, you know, so it's kind of thinking about how can you implement that concept within your decisions. And it really does start from the beginning, from the design of the product for repairability, refurbishment, you know, like how are we making this so that it can have a long and fruitful life and be able to come back as something else. And what is that? But yeah, so it's 2:00, everybody. Thank you so much. It seems that there is a recording of this that could be sent out to the registered people. So thank you very much. Panelists, you were great. It was so fun to talk to you.
Thanks for having us.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.